So have you been shopping for a luxury car like a Mercedes? Well, recently I have as well, and I bet you thought about how you're going to pay for it. Is it going to be cash, finance, or are you going to lease that car? Well, I thought about all those three factors as well, and when I bought my Mercedes, but I actually ran from the idea of leasing it. A lot of people brag up the lease, but guess what? If you want to waste lots of money, that's a great way to go. Otherwise, follow my tips and you can save a whole pile of money. I'm going to explain to you right now. So there's a lot of ads out there and great marketing by a lot of these dealers that tell you, oh, only $300 a month, only $250 a month, or only $75 a week. And guess what? A lot of those are just not only scams, but they're not telling the whole story. But I need to dive into why people tell you that the lease is the way to go. But in fact, I will tell you the reality and how you can truly save money in the long term, as I've learned to do, because I've bought and owned numerous luxury cars and supercars over the years. But the first point that people really talk about is interest rates and the lease rates that you can get a vehicle for. Now, they vary quite dramatically from vehicle to vehicle and brand to brand. It is something you really have to be cognizant of. Watch for those rates. But you've also got to do your homework. You know, often lease rates are quite competitive, but often finance rates are even lower. And if you buy cash, sometimes you don't get the discounts that you do when you pick up a finance or a lease. But you've got to balance that all out, because often buying cash isn't always the best way to go either. You don't get the discounts, you don't get the extra incentives. So that's a bit of a gouge fest. But watch those rates and be sure to make sure you do the homework on lease versus finance rates. I personally have always found finance rates to be more competitive, and often you can shop around. You have more opportunities to get rates and find different lending opportunities. Sometimes you can even dip into a line of credit and find yourself with an even lower payment. So it really does allow you to shop around when you're going with a financing rate, whether you're picking up the financing from the brand, or whether you're picking up the financing from your own personal bank, or whether you're just doing some sort of other financial institution lending opportunity. There, it gives you some of that benefit of competitiveness. If you go with a lease, you're pretty much locked into whatever that lease rate is by the manufacturer. So I found often that the rates on financing are a little lower. So the second reason why a lot of people justify leasing is if your budget is low, and they'll say, well, you know, maybe I only have X amount of dollars to spend in a given month. So a lease will often give me certain flexibility. If I reduce the mileage allowance on my lease term, sometimes I can knock prices down. If I increase my payment down or deposit, sometimes I can knock my monthly budget price down as well. There's a lot of factors you can go to sort of build and kind of design your own payment schedule. But unfortunately, remember, lease, you never really own the car. And that's why I've always shied away from that. Regardless of what your monthly budget is, I don't believe in monthly budget. I think monthly budget is a bit of a factor, but at the end of the day, how much money is ultimately coming out of your pocket? That's really the most important factor. They blow all this smoke and mirrors, but the reality is they'll tell you, oh, you can do this for $250 a month, you're good to go with this car. But again, as I say, sadly enough, you have to consider what your total payment is at the end of the term. Sure, you can pay for 2 years at $250 a month, but at the end of that term, you have zero to show for it. You have squat. And if you've exceeded your pre-agreed mileage, you pay a penalty. If you've broken the windshield, you pay a penalty. If you've worn out those rear tires because it's a powerful luxury car, you pay a penalty. Lots of penalties on top of that, so it no longer becomes a $250 charge. So the third reason why people justify going with a lease is when the rates are low. Obviously, right now, it is a competitive time, obviously, with what's going on around us. You know, a lot of the businesses are doing things for incentives and try to bring and lure in new customers. And so you will find a lot of competitive rates. We find now mortgage rates are low, bank rates are low overall, lending rates are low. There's lots of incentives for lease and finance. So sure, right now seems to be a pretty optimal time to either finance or lease. But don't be suckered in. Because generally speaking, outside of the small window right now, what's going on, normally if you're seeing a higher lease or a higher finance rate, that just means you're going to pay a whole lot of money in interest, and you really don't want to do that. So the way I see it is try to get something either out of a line of credit or your own open-ended finance terms so that you're able to close on a payment at any point. Cars that I recently purchased, for example, I bought an F-Type Jag recently where I was able to have an open-ended term. So all I had to do was make the first payment, and any time after that, if I happen to save up a whole bunch of extra cash, I could pay it down and then I own the vehicle outright. If you lease a vehicle, you're sort of structured and locked into those monthly payments. At the end of it, again, I repeat, you never actually own the vehicle. The same thing happened with our recent purchase on our Mercedes C300. The same thing applies there. We had a very competitive finance term where I could pay it down at any point, and again, not locked down and no penalties associated with an early payoff. So the fourth reason why people justify going with a lease is if you change your cars like you change your underwear. In other words, if you're changing it regularly, if you're buying a new car every 2 or 3 years, that might be something to consider going with a lease. Sure. But where I come from, I often like to keep my cars for a little bit longer. So I do my research on the front end so I'm not bored out of my tree and having to change a car every 2 years because I'm bored of it. I do the research. I make sure I shop for a car that I know what to expect for reliability. I shop for a car that's going to excite me for several years. And I shop for a car that I know I'm going to be engaged with and happy with for several years. And then I don't buy a car for 2 years. I typically buy a car for at least 4 or 5 years or beyond. We have a lot of vehicles that I've owned for 10 years plus. As a matter of fact, look at my BMW E60 M5. I've owned that car now for close to 10 years. So again, as I say, I would recommend doing your homework, finding the right car for you, and then holding on to it for a little longer. Otherwise, if you're one of these people that has to have a new car every 2 years, well, leasing's probably your game, because financing, you'll end up taking too much of a hit every time you see that depreciation in front of you. It's going to give you the smackdown and you're going to lose a whole pile of money. Otherwise, you're almost better off just holding on to that car for 4 or 5 years. You're going to see depreciation, but that curve becomes flatter as the age of the car increases. So again, it's that first 1 to 2 years that really takes a big hit, and that's the lease term. So hence, keep the car for a bit longer and you'll avoid additional expenses and loss due to depreciation. So the fifth reason why people often try to justify leasing, and I think it's absolute bananas, is trying to avoid maintenance costs. You think, okay, I'm gonna buy this car, I'm actually going to lease this car, keep it for 2 years, maybe 3 years, and I'm gonna avoid all the services associated with maintaining a car. Well, with some of these manufacturers, specifically you look at the BMWs and the Benzes of the world, and a lot of times they incorporate maintenance included in some of their manufacturer warranties or arrangements when you buy a car. That's great, sure, you avoid 2 or 3 oil changes. After all, don't forget, now these manufacturers often extend these oil changes to 10, 15, 20,000 kilometers between oil changes. You may not even see more than one oil change in a year. What are you trying to save, $150? If you're trying to avoid maintenance costs due to going with a lease, you have missed the point. Because the aggressive depreciation will more than decimate the little minuscule amount that you're saving on oil changes or some other little servicing. So if you're trying to stay in a lease or a short-term finance, you're just going to blow your money out the window like there's no tomorrow. So all I would say is don't incorporate that into your thought process. Be the type of person that find the right car, buy into a car that is the right one for you, and hold on to it for a period of time that's going to guarantee to save you more money than flipping a car every 2 years under a lease term. So the sixth reason why a lot of people go with a lease is the feeling that they're buying into a car, a BMW, an Audi, a Benz, a Maserati, whatever it is, and they fear about reliability, and they feel that, I can own this great car for 2 years, maybe 3 years, and then I can walk away from it, and I never have to worry about reliability issues. I never have to worry about significant repairs or maintenance. It all just gets blended and handed off as soon as I turn the keys back over, and life's good. But again, this comes back to my perspective on it. That's why I bought this Mercedes, is I've done my homework. Do the research. Find the car that's reasonably reliable. Find the car that you can live with. Find the car that excites you. And find the car that you want to own for 4 or 5 years and buy it. And then deal with those little consequential things. But you just need to understand where the weakness is. There's a lot of information on the internet these days that tell you about reliability issues with this car or with that car. That's great. There's so much information out there, you can make smart decisions. So why would you just go on a whim and just assume every car is a piece of trash and after 3 years I want to be rid of it, when in fact you might want to hold on to it for 5 or 6 years because it's treating you well. So don't treat it like an insurance policy. Buy the right car and hold on to it. So another very compelling reason why you do not want to lease a luxury car is because When you do that, you feel very compelled to keep the miles down because there is a penalty associated with going higher than the allocated mileage. You don't want to drive it too much because you might wear something out. You might break a windshield because a lot of these luxury cars now have windshields that cost $1,000, $2,000, $3,000. So you're scared to take it out on busy freeways where you might break a windshield. There's a lot of reasons why you might limit yourself, self-limited, and you don't want to drive the car as much as you might actually normally enjoy. So you're not enjoying the vehicle as much as you want. As well, one of the strongest, most telling reasons why I didn't lease my Mercedes and why I likely wouldn't lease too many other cars is because I buy them when they're usually about 2 or 3 years old. Why? Well, guess what? When you buy a car that's 2 or 3 years old, A, you can be flexible on where you're getting your finance rates from, and B, you beat a lot of the depreciation. Remember, I've talked about this in other videos, where your first 2 years, a lot of cars will see anywhere from 30, 40, 50% depreciation in that first 2 to 3 years. Why not pass that off? Buy that car at 2 years or maybe 3 years of age. If you do it right, you walk into the dealership, you get those guys to offer you the CPO warranty, in other words, certified pre-owned, because it's a low mileage, high quality car that's had no accidents. They'll offer you that, buy that CPO warranty. A lot of these cars, you can get that for an extra $1,500, maybe $2,000. And now you've got the full warranty, you've got the full peace of mind, and you shed all of that depreciation, and you don't worry about leasing and wasting all that hard-earned dollars, guys. That's why I don't lease a car, and that's why I didn't lease my new Mercedes-Benz. And I really hope those tips helped you guys. Be sure to click on that video link. That's going to take you to my latest video about why Mercedes-Benz are so cheap and the fact that I bought one. So hope to see you guys real soon. Catch you then. Bye-bye.